into my talk today. Remember, the focus of my talk is that we are in the 7 weeks between Tisha B'Av and Rosh Hashanah. As I wrote last week, we have a very deep desire that this time is important and transformative to you, that it's understandable to you, that the common complaint that we have that religion can be boring, it's just rituals, it doesn't have depth, it doesn't touch my heart. We want to sidestep all of that and find a way that all of us can find deep meaning in this, in really in every inner area of our life that matters to us. So the first step that I talked about last week, again, I'm following Essay on Man by Ernst Cassirer. I'll say a little bit more about the book. What I'm saying is, if don't order it. It's the kind of thing I read in graduate school, and I'll talk a little bit about why I loved it and why I don't think you should spend the time reading it. There's other things you can read. Unless it's assigned, then of course, read and do your best. But I loved it. I'll tell you why I loved it and why I don't think, again, unless you're compelled, why you shouldn't, and what you could read instead. And I want to extract the very basics that I think you need to know and guide you in something much more understandable than this book by Ernst Cassirer. So in the first chapter of the book, he's going into the Socratic maxim, taken from the Delphic Oracle, of the absolute obligation to know yourself. And the knowing of the self is not knowing something static, something that you, as it were, open a door and see it. So when people say discover the authentic self, discover the true self, that a person is not being genuine, there's a genuine self that needs to come through and speak. I understand what people are saying, just don't take it too seriously, because it's really a metaphor. Because what we call authenticity, the true self, the truth of oneself, is a dynamic process. And as I said last night, when you open that door, you're walking into a vortex of images and feelings and associations and memories and meaning of your life trying to work itself out. So going into that place leads one into the activity of creating human authenticity and human genuineness. It doesn't ever become rigid. It's a constant kind of music and images going on. If you don't go into that room, into that place within, then you're a stranger to yourself. You don't know, you have no idea what's going on inside of you. If you go into that room, it's not as if you find the one thing, but from that place, going into that deep place, you might be able to say the one true thing at that moment. And I shared with you the practice taught by Rebbe Nachman of Bratslav. When you sit down to do inner work, the first thing he says do is align yourself with yourself, go into that space, and say the truest thing that you can say. It's not the only true thing you'll say, but it's the truest thing you can say at that moment. And you say the truest thing you can say at that moment into the heart of the universe. People say, well, what if I don't believe in God? What if I don't understand what the heart of the universe is? My response is, of course you understand it. When I say the heart of the universe, it's a metaphor, it's a mythic expression that human beings are called to a life of truth and authenticity. It's not something that entirely comes from within. We'll talk about that problem in just a moment. So try to imagine there is an area within us where the core of our being is working itself out. And if you don't open that door on occasion, you stay a stranger to yourself. And therefore, we have a duty to go into that chamber of the self working itself out. Again, Cassirer at this prefers certain parts of what Plato has left us through Socrates. And then he goes through and talks about the Aristotelian point of view and the Stoic point of view, which, in his opinion, is so focused on a rigid kind of rationality. Let's talk about the Stoics, that we live according to the logos, the rational mind of the universe. And if we can find the rational mind of the universe, the logos, and live according to it, then we are living a life of truth. Cassirer then talks about St. Augustine, who was a Neoplatonist, Aristotelian, Stoic, and lived the sense of just being one with the universe. You probably heard that before. He discovers Christianity, and putting aside what I'll call the details of Christian theology, I want to talk about the phenomenological experience of Christian theology. Okay, remember, it's not the actual details, but what happens to you is something says to you, I'm a liar. I sin. I'm not honest. I've been hiding from the truth the whole time. I've been hiding from other people. I've been hiding from myself. Spent my whole life avoiding the chamber of truth. Now, for Augustine, when he opened the chamber of truth, he profoundly felt the error of his ways. He was somewhat of a libertine, a hedonist, an Epicurean. Life is here to enjoy, and he realized this idea of the hedonistic enjoying life, it addressed such a small part of the depth of his humanity that was almost a lie. Life is not here to enjoy. There are things we should enjoy. To put it in my terms, we're here to do our duty. And sometimes doing your duty is not enjoyable. Sometimes the duty of self-knowledge, of being present to another being, of putting your needs aside because it's someone else's needs that take prominence in your life. The duty to defer to others. I think the incredible humanity of relations with other people sometimes means a real diminution of our own ego interest. So the idea that our duty in life is to enjoy life, I said, well, sometimes life requires suffering, especially if you want to be a good person. Suffering is required. Not getting your needs met is required. Not wanting to enjoy every moment is required. There's something much larger at stake. Martin Seligman might call it authentic happiness. I like the idea, but it's a word that I'll later on share with you that I think it's good, but it doesn't quite capture what I'm trying to talk about. So this is what Kassir talks about in the beginning of the book, and for the rest of the book, I just reread it. He's setting up and knocking down one theory of the human being after another, and he feels he has to do it for his readers. These are serious intellectuals who, in his mind, engage in one mistake after another of what it means to be a human being. And from Kassir's mind, they're all reductionists. Now, you don't need to go through that unless you seriously want to study the history of philosophic anthropology, meaning the histories of theories of the human being. One of the reasons I like Kassir is where he ended up is where I am, and I am where I am because I read Kassir and several others. So putting aside all of the attempts to reduce the human being to one thing or another, where does he end up? So what I want to share with you today as our second step. What we end up is that the human beings are not reducible. We can't define the human being. We can't define the mind. We can't define thinking. We can't define the soul. There's nothing essential about the human being that we can define without the words folding into other words. I talked about this recently about morality. You can't define the right, the good. One way we put this is there are certain words that are not transparent, that you look at the word and behind the word is the truth of the word. Well, some words are foundational. I mean, they are the rock of human experience. So when you see the word God, self, love, justice, truth, and beauty, you can't efficiently break it down into constituent parts, because then you got to define those things. And at the end, you're going to hit the bedrock of human consciousness. So when you hit the bedrock of human consciousness, for Kassir, you're in the area of myth, language, art, music, these metaphysical terms, love, justice, truth, and beauty, which from Kassir's perspective is most efficiently presented in the word religion. So try to imagine you go deep into yourself, you open that chamber, you discover the maelstrom of the conscious mind, and you come out and you resist reducing your life to one thing or another. So why is religion the next step? Now, I have to emphasize, by religion, I don't mean badly practiced religion. And I have to say, with some sadness, that most religious experience that I've had have not been satisfying for me. Sometimes if people reduce religion to politics. It's been reduced to adherence to Jewish law, to halakha. As much as I admire Maimonides, I don't believe the Jewish religion is reducible to, an Aristotelian type of thinking. So what is religion? Now, I'm a religion major. I have an undergraduate degree in religion. I have a doctorate in religion. So I want to share something what it's like for you. Religion, for me, is a linguistic symbol system with myths and symbols that draws into a certain kind of thinking, an assortment of symbols and myths that shape our consciousness and shape our identity. Realizing that you're always living in a mythic symbol system. Of course, by myth, we don't mean not true. We mean things that you unconsciously assume to be true if you don't think about it. Let me give you an example. So, I read the literature of angry atheists. I remember when I first, I keep picking on Sam Harris, but he's what comes to mind. He hates religion, and there's a time when he thought, that we're just particles of some kind of quantum field of consciousness. He discovered Buddhism, which is that it's all nothingness and so forth. And in his book, The Moral Landscape, he's a utilitarian, the greatest good for the greatest number. I said, okay, I've heard a lot of that. But then I asked myself, so what are you so angry about? I mean, if there's no real right or wrong, no real good or bad, it's all an illusion. What makes you so mad? Now, what makes him mad, I've had to try to infer him and many, many other people, Yuval Harari, many other people who say there's no meaning. Morality is just a made-up bourgeois concept of, the bourgeois middle class who are trying to take their bourgeois values, project on the world. There really is no right and wrong. And then you find something they care about and they rage and they try to persuade other people that they're right. I think to myself, well, if there's nothing, why are you so busy trying to persuade people? So you see, when you find what people are angry about, especially in intellectual, spiritual concerns, then you know they're myth. So, for example, there are many people who claim to be atheists. Here's what they're mad about. There's something called the truth, and there's something called falsehood. And they've discovered the truth, and they're angry at people who are propagating the false. And they assign human suffering to false beliefs. So the people that are angry about false beliefs and want to eradicate false beliefs, who do they sound like? Ancient Hebrew prophets. It's Isaiah and Jeremiah on a mission. In our Torah portion, destroy all the Canaanite idols, destroy religion, get the 10 Commandments out of the schools, make everything nothingness. And I think to myself, they're on a mission to destroy something that they say is the source of evil. So I've had this discussion with many people who say to me, Rabbi Finley, religion is the source of most evil. Of course, I push back and say, yeah, well, atheists had a good go under Stalin and Mao. If you just want to do a body stack, I think communist atheism has caused much more carnage in the world than any kind of religiosity. Yeah, if you want to go back in history, even then, probably the most predatory empire the world has ever seen, which is the Mongol Empire, they weren't spreading religion; they just wanted to have power. So even the idea that religion is the cause of evil, it's such a superficial idea that cannot be historically substantiated, but it's said by smart people. So what does that tell me? They're living in a mythic system. They're living in a mythic system of right and wrong, good and bad. They found the evil called religion. They themselves see themselves as prophets of truth, and they're on a mission to convert humanity to their truth, which is believe in nothing. So for me, this is, again, as someone who's a religion major, whenever a person is trying to discuss some kind of truth, even if there is no truth, that's the mythic world they live in. But it's not sustainable, because every person who says there is no truth, then why don't they just be quiet? I mean, if there's no truth, then by what standard are they saying there's no truth? Meaning, what criterion are they can point to that there's no truth? Maybe there is truth. So we all live within a mythic system. We all live within a symbol system, right? So the deeper we go, one task of ourselves is not only know yourself, according to Socrates, is What is your real religion? What symbol and mythic system are you looking at? See, this is what I take from Kassir without going through his detailed arguments of pushing back against every other theory of the human being. He says, we live in a symbol system. Don't reduce it to dogma. Don't try to finalize the definition of the human being. Stay in this unfinished project, but you want to be immersed in something that's bringing you to the mystery. Right. So, for example, I sometimes when I look at Jungian psychology, um, when people say I don't believe in God, but they're so angry, they're so hateful. I say, yeah, you believe in God. It's the God of Mars. It's the God of war. That's the God operating inside of you. You don't know it, but from a Jungian perspective, the God of war has taken you over because you're so aggressive and so hateful and so bent on destroying either libel or slander, or actually there's a God in there, right? And the interesting thing is you can go across cultures, across religions, and you'll discover, this is obviously a metaphor, how many people have been taken over by the God of war. The God of war, again, it goes through religions and non-religions. So my idea is we're always living in a symbol system. We're always living in a world of good, of bad, right and wrong. And what we have to do, number one, is own it, and then something more difficult, and to stand back and say, it is a symbol system that I've been born into. It's a symbol system that I have taken over, and take responsibility for your symbol system. So I can look at I've had discussions recently. Last night we talked about, Ernst Cassirer flourished during the Weimar Republic. Was a efflorescing of some of the greatest philosophers in the modern period, really ever, all at the same time in the Weimar Republic, which was crushed, of course, by Nazi Germany, which itself felt threatened by communist Russia. A very, very, very tragic story. But you have the ideology of Nazism, ideology of communism, and people trying to work out the human condition were crushed on both sides, fled to America. So we were talking about how there's in Germany at the time, probably the greatest progress human beings have made in figuring this thing out called the human condition. Now, one of them is existentialism. And as you know, I have a I and Rabbi Manning, we both have a very, very deep calling to existentialism. And the idea is being accountable for how you're making sense of existence. In existentialism, we have the idea of thrownness. You're thrown into a universe. Your culture, your idea, hands you a ready-made world. They say, believe in this. And you say to yourself, wait a minute, maybe I do and maybe I don't, but I have to take a step back and examine what I'm taught to believe in. Now, here's the most fascinating thing. As you're examining what you're taught to believe in, some criterion comes up. By the way, I'll go into this more in my Bible class. Many people who read the Bible and they get so mad at the Bible because God is warlike, my question to them is, so you do have, even though you don't believe in God, you have an idea what God's supposed to be like. Isn't that interesting? Well, I don't believe in God, but I know what God's supposed to be like, and it's not that. That's very curious that people are experts on what God's supposed to be like, the God they don't believe in. So one thing I mentioned last night is maybe the one thing the Bible does is challenge you to find the God that you do believe in, that you can critique the God presented in the Bible, which of course is a literary creation by the biblical authors. So one thing that the idea of thrownness does, you have to ask yourself, well, if the world is devoid of meaning, it's one thing I learned in existentialism, right? Either I can live in a nihilistic world, or I can, I can actually or make a bid. If the world is devoid of meaning, but I'm a meaning maker, what meaning do I want to make of this world? What is the core meaning that I want to project into the world, and project it into the world so deeply and so sincerely that I'm not going to budge? Now, for me, when I went through this existentialist period, the core meaning I projected into the world is moral realism. There are better and worse answers to moral questions. That is my core mythic statement. If someone says to me, It's all subjective. It's relativism. How do you know? You can't answer the epistemological question of how you know. You can't answer the ontological question of where is the moral standard. All these critiques get thrown at me. I say, yeah, you're right. I can't tell you how I know. I mean, I can describe a kind of a moral intuitionism. I can't prove it to a skeptic, but I'm not budging. I remember the point in my life where I said, there are better and worse answers to moral questions, and I'm not budging. I can't justify it to a skeptic. I can't prove it ontologically or metaphysically. I've asserted it. Now, what caused me to assert this? Hard for me to know, but I know that I was brought up in a symbol system. In the synagogue, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice shall you pursue. Our extraordinary care for the widow, orphan, and stranger. Looking at Proverbs, looking at Psalms that I studied when I was in high school, living a life of truth and having inner knowledge. I remember when I've told the story many times when I was at the Long Beach Jewish Community Center, walking through the library, and I saw the section on Hasidism. I remember thinking to myself, well, I heard of this. I wonder what it is. So I pulled off Martin Buber's Tales of the Hasidic Masters. I opened it up randomly, and it said, Menachem, I think it was Menachem Mendel of Vorky said, what constitutes a true Jew? I said, okay, I'll see what's up here. And he says, uh, silent screaming, upright kneeling, and motionless dance. So this young 17-year-old existentialist said, okay, I'm in. if you can come up with that, I want more. So I began reading
Say that
Buber's.
again, Ava. Can you say that again?
I get it out of order, but something like this. What constitutes an Erlich Yid, a true Jew? Um, uh, upright kneeling, silent screaming, and motionless dance. Okay. So I'll talk to my daughter now. You can imagine me, 17 years old, just trying to say, what is this thing? And walking in the library of the Long Beach Jewish Community Center, pulling up a random book, opening to a random page. And there it was. Okay. So now that's, I don't know how to say it. It's one of the truest things I've ever read. It's not just an Erlich Yid, a true Jew, it's a true human being. Now, I can't reify that metaphor. I can't reduce it to something other than when I read it, it just grabbed me and pulled me and caused me to look at myself. I still don't know why it meant so much, but I was transfixed by it. So when I think about what my religion is, I believe in one God. Like some people say, well, we Jews believe in one God. So, well, if you don't believe in any God, one's more efficient. I mean, if you're not going to believe in God, just don't believe in one God. Why don't believe in several gods? So it's like I don't care about one God or not one God. It doesn't mean anything to me. What means something to me is this linguistic symbol system that propels me into my depths and alerts me to look at the life with wonder. I'll give you another example. When I went through my more orthodox phase, I had to study what are called Birkot Nehenim, which is all the blessings you say when you enjoy something. So blessing over, food and blessing over different kinds of food. And as I'm studying this long list of blessings, and one of them is the blessing when you experience an earthquake.
Mhm.
Oh, well, we're California, that's actually maybe useful. So it's Osem Maaseh Bereshit, the one who performs the works of creation, meaning earthquakes are born into the earth. So I put that away for future knowledge. One time I'm on the phone in California talking to an Orthodox woman, and there was an earthquake. I said, "Should we say the bracha?" Yes, and we said the bracha together. So I knew what to say during an earthquake. Now, that was more important for me than the idea of one God. I have to tell you, the fact that the tradition said this might happen to you. Another one that I read when I was studying my Birkot Nehenim. What do you do what bracha do you say when you see 600,000 Jews all at the same time? Okay, there's a bracha. And the bracha is Baruch atah Adonai Hacham Harazim, the one who's wise to the secrets. Who wrote that? Who wrote the idea that you see a big mass of human beings, you say all the secrets are assembled, and God is wise to every single one of them. Okay? See, so when I mean what a religion is, when I study Torah and I study commentaries and Midrash and the prayer book, I'm not brought into theological reflection. I'm using it as tools for my own constant reflection. And these brachot and these blessings and these halachot and these customs and traditions, they form a symbolic world for me. So, for example, let's just take that last one. When I remember when I read that, um, I thought, so part of what it means to be a learned Jew is that every person has a secret, and by definition, you don't know what your secret is. And there's something called the divine that knows your secret, Chacham Harazim, who's wise to you. Now, sit with that for a moment. You have a secret. You don't know what it is, but it's propelling you. It's pushing you through life. You think you know what you're about, and this is not Freud and reducing everything to sex, or even Jung reducing everything to inner gods, although I think Jung is more right than Freud. But try to imagine there's a secret life propelling you. And as you're taking care of business, you really don't know what's going on inside of you. But there's some knowledge, there's some knowing mind called Chacham Harazim, the one who's on to you. That's a very kind of Leonard Cohen kind of a thought. And I remember thinking to myself, well, if God is on to me, Chacham Harazim, wise to my secrets, then I want to have a relationship with the divine who will let me in on my secrets, my secret life that's propelling me. Now, I want to just suggest to you, think now, you read Guide for the Perplexed, and Maimonides is working on, biblical language that does not concur with Aristotelian thought. It's an important project. It means nothing to me. I don't need someone to explain to me how biblical language concurs with Aristotelian thought. It doesn't plague me. For me, it's the inner life practice. So step two in our journey to the high holidays, after you go in, to that hidden chamber of the maelstrom of self-knowledge, which of course reminds me of the Baal Shem Tov's teaching on the Siddur, which says every word of the Siddur. This is in in the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. It's called Amud HaTfilah. You can look it up, AMUD, the pillar of prayer. And he says every word of the Siddur is an opening, every teva, every word of the prayer book opens, as it were, a light into the soul, and every word contains souls and worlds and angels, nefashot, olamot, malachim. He says something different in a different passage. He says Elohut, nefashot, malachim, divinity, souls, and prayer. Now, this is not about lining up Aristotelian language with the Bible. This is about every word opens up into a cavern filled with divinity, worlds, and souls and angels. So you take your prayer book and you look at it, and it's openings into caverns. And you open the cavern, and it's experiential, it's deep. I've shared with you many times when I open a Siddur, I get through 3 words and I say, enough. I'm suffused. It's unbearably deep. I come out of it. I gotta organize it. What just happened to me? Where did I go with this? What did I learn about myself, the human condition, other human beings? Do I have to do or not do something? Do I have to stop doing something and start doing something else? I just go into the mystery. I said, okay, that's my allotted time for spiritual practice for today, and I go forward. So this is that I want to offer you is we always live in a mythic, symbolic world. Own it. You want to live in the Jewish mythic, symbolic world? Learn how to read the poetry of the Siddur. Learn how to read the poetry of Torah. Look at a little bit of Midrash. There are so many sources today. In fact, that's going to be the focus of my Bible classes, how to study the Bible for these moments where the depths of the Bible reach out to you and grab you, partly because we actually permit ourselves to read the Bible not by some theological map where we think we know what God is, but actually encounter the disturbing divine in the book. I subtitled my to the Bible a book of mystery, misdirection, mayhem, murder, and things. Look at the first 4 chapters of the Bible, right? Um, yeah, so we have the first the not the first murder. We weren't there, during the origins of human beings. But the Bible got through 4 chapters and it says you need to know something about murder and why somebody murdered somebody and what happened to the murderer. Now, the Bible wants us to know that. They want us to study and sink into that. Now, the problem is oftentimes people turn these biblical scenes into adult education classes, meaning the moral of the story. Well, there's no moral of the story because it's about you. Okay? Have you ever you want to murder somebody? Do you ever have that kind of rage? You ever felt that envious, that slighted, that misunderstood, and your emotions welled up in you? And if you would have had a knife or a gun in your hand, you might have lost control of yourself. And even if you didn't, the emotions were there. Well, Cain is in you. So you read Cain, you say, I don't understand him. Of course you understand him because he's in every one of us. So when you read the Bible as a book of archetypal psychology that's trying to name phases of the human being, this is Ernst Cassirer. See, he says the religion is not about believe in one thing or another thing. Religion is about an assemblage of symbols and myths. Myth not meaning that it's not true, but an organization of reality that we live inside of. When you study religion this way, I stand back and say to myself, well, what organization of reality do I live inside of? Well, I mean, the basic way I organize reality is the liberal state. I own it. I'm a modern liberal. I believe we have rights. I believe that the liberal state is the best way for us, we human beings, to organize ourselves. And in the liberal state, the job of the state is we're going to keep peace and order. We're going to have a regulated free market. We're going to protect our human rights. And then you go about the business of making meaning of your life or not, and don't interfere with anybody else. So I believe in the liberal state because I want to live in a state of, of prosperity and equal opportunity and human rights. And I don't want the state to tell me what to think or what to do on this thing. And I want to freely associate with other people and get about the business of making meaning of my life. So that's my arc myth. Then I come down to the meaning making myth. And now that I live, and I'm going to include Israel in this as a incredible example of the liberal state. Now I want to engage in meaning making, which of course for me always means engaging in the depths of Jewish text. So my takeaway for all of you, if we're moving to this mountain range called the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, and you've gone through step 1, and you've had the vertigo of going into the chamber of self-knowledge and say, okay, I went in there, I don't know exactly who I am, but there's a lot going on. Now you step out and say, but I live in a symbol system that's going to give me myths and symbols so I can work this thing through. I'm going to have a language that I need to master and a language that I share with other people. So as I'm, sitting with all of you, either or if you keep coming back, you will know, well, we have this idea called Torah, which is not the 5 books of Moses. It's from the word lehorot, which means to teach. It's like a nomos, an organization of reality, the mind of God reaching down into human beings. It's a gift of love that we just read in the Ahava Rabbah prayer. It contains chukei chaim, it contains laws of life. And if you attend to this, you'll live life better. Okay, so there's that. There are better and worse ways to live. And these chukei chaim, these laws of life, are communicated to us in love. This is again, according to this myth, the greatest gift that God gives us is imparting to us the chukei chaim for our good. And if you learn these chukei chaim, life might go one way, and if you ignore them, life might go another way. And there really are chukei chaim in relationships, in families, in the workplace, in your life. The more you go through life, you realize there's a moral framework in which to do these things. And when I rebel against that framework, I hurt myself, I hurt somebody else. And if I understand that framework and live inside that framework, things go as well as they can be, putting aside, of course, external forces. So when you move into the symbol system, and for example, symbol of Torah and many other things, you realize instead of living in a haphazard world, where the symbol system is organized for us, God forbid becoming, a Nazi or a communist or a jihadist or an Islamicist or a postmodernist or a neo-Marxist, which I think are all, number one, I think they're not sustainable for any intelligent person, but they're also destructive. Why are so many young people taken with it? Because they haven't been given the tools to create an authentic simple system to create a human life, a flourishing human life of human dignity. They got swept into something because they don't have something else. So what we have to do, in my mind, is that in the step two, like, let's go into this simple system, read as much as we can about it, forget theology, God exists, God doesn't exist. It doesn't matter, from my opinion. What matters is dive into the system. I prefer, as you know, the neo-Hasidic approach. If you want to, go read Martin Buber's Legends of the Hasidic Masters. That's a really great way to spend your time. Anything on Hasidic philosophy, anything on Hasidic poetry, then you're in the system. Then you are in the language system. And watch what happens when you start to read the Hasidic view of the world. All right, that's my message for today. Judaism, once we come out of again our experience of self, which again gives a kind of a vertigo, you move into a symbol system. We become conscious meaning makers, and part of the meaning that we have is, at our core, we err, and the less we err, the better it gets.